like I said, weak leadership. It's a cop-out again. But I think when they hire externally, often they're hiring someone who's already been proven in that job. So it's lack of taking risk. It's not necessarily hiring someone from another organization who's stepping up into that role. They very rarely will do that. So normally it'll be that, we need someone in a leadership role. We need someone who's already been in a leadership role. We're not going to take a risk and put you into a leadership role.
Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sydney Professional Development Forum, or PDF for short. My name is Ella, and I'll be moderating for this evening. For those who are unfamiliar with PDF was established to help diverse young professionals to find fulfillment in their career. We are a group of volunteers seeking to help others, and we believe that everyone should have access to the knowledge, mindset, and the network to become the best version of themselves. A bit of housekeeping for today. Before we get started, please note that this is a recorded session as well that will be distributed by social media in the near future. Also, I would like everyone to update their name again and turn on their cameras if possible. That would be really awesome. There will also be a link in the chat box for you guys to share your LinkedIns so we can get connected and chat about how wonderful this event was later on. Lastly, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. You will also have an opportunity to ask questions to Rebecca directly at the end of the session as well. And if you stay tuned until the end, Rebecca might have something really special for you guys, so keep that in mind. A bit about Rebecca. So since starting her own business in 2001, Rebecca has become known in the industry as a leading sales, leadership, and go-to-market recruitment specialist. She's also a leadership and culture coach. And more recently, she started her new role as senior recruiter for ANZ at Snowflake. And her passion has always been to help clients become better leaders by having better hiring, retention, and people development experiences. Rebecca worked with many leading organizations and helping them to build and transform their teams into incredibly high-performing, highly successful teams. Rebecca, it is great to have you here on PDF tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for the intro. And yeah, look, I'm really happy to be here. I think what you're doing with this group is fantastic, and more than excited to come on and share what I can. I hope I can add some value tonight and share some morsels, even if there's just one or two things people take away. That would be great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for being here. I know that everyone here is in some form of lockdown if you're in Australia, because the whole of East Coast at the moment is now in lockdown. But we can all agree that it's been a really weird year, and I'm sure everybody's really sick of talking about it by now. But what's been happening in the job market, I think, is pretty interesting. And could you tell us a bit about what your take is on the market?
Yeah, so it's been a really interesting ride. So obviously everything just dropped into a hole at the beginning of COVID, and it became really challenging for anyone in the job market. However, there's been a huge turnaround, and there is the action in the job market is phenomenal right now. So I don't know why, I don't know the reason behind it, but the job market is really hotting up, and I think it's important to be part of it. If it's the right timing for you, it's a really good time to consider your career and where it's at. So
I know in the beginning of my career in the corporate world, I really struggled with understanding how to really position myself on LinkedIn, how to write my Bs and all that stuff. What are some of the typical issues you see with the candidates' profile, CVs, or LinkedIn?
Where do I start? So that's a really, really good question, and one I talk about a lot. So I think firstly, there is a difference between a resume and a LinkedIn profile. So that's really important to discern. Excuse me. So starting with I'm going to start with LinkedIn, because for me, LinkedIn is the number one thing. So for me, we have the opportunity, well, not for everyone, we have the opportunity to brand ourselves these days. So what I think we need to do is we need to firstly understand exactly and get very clear on what it is that we think we want to do. And sometimes that's working with mentors or people in your life, possibly people in your workplace, to help you really get clear on where are your strengths, where do you really enjoy what you do, What don't you enjoy doing? And, we need to play to our strengths. You can find a really good tool for that as well. It's called Strength Finder. And you can Google that and you can go and do a Strength Finder test online. I think you can get, some of it is for free, and then you can pay a fee and you can get a bigger report. But that's a really great way to start identifying some of the strengths that you have. And you'll find that when you're working to your strengths, you're happy and you will achieve better and your career will build itself. So I think the first thing is to make sure that that's the case, because a lot of us get into our careers and we kind of get on the hamster wheel and just keep going and going and going, and we kind of fall into things and we don't make necessarily the right choices as we're moving through our career. So I think really understanding what your strengths are and, more importantly, what you enjoy doing is critical. And when you've done that, you can kind of define what your next role or what your roles might look like. So what are you looking for? So for example, it could be, well, I've decided I'm really good at customer success. I'm really good at managing customer relationships. So that's the path I'm going to take. It could be in the IT industry. I think a lot of people here are in the IT industry. It could be in a different industry. Once you've got that framework, that's when you can look at your LinkedIn profile, and what you should be doing is branding yourself. So see it as a brand opportunity. If you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see, some of the things I do there. So there's a whole lot of things I teach people, but making sure you're really clear on what it is you do and what it is you want to do. And when I talk about the LinkedIn profile, so the about section, to me, that is your chance to differentiate. So, I see a lot of people who have just a photo of themselves, sometimes not even smiling, and they don't have the background picture. And, why not? It's a really good opportunity to do something that's going to stand out, because if you're looking at 5 people, say you're a recruiter and you're looking at 5 people on LinkedIn, and 4 of them just have that, photo and not much else, and one of them stands out with their picture, and then perhaps their byline as well underneath their name, so their description, they're the person who's going to make a difference. They're the person who's going to get the attention. The second part is the about section. So the about section is the opportunity to really talk to who you are, what you're about, what your style is. I get people to write a bit of a story. So people think I'm a bit crazy when I'm coaching, because I do a lot of career coaching or career transition coaching. And, I am a seasoned sales professional with 5 years experience is really boring. So, what I encourage people to do is find something that is going to grab attention and start with that. So mine is, for example, when I was 11 years old, I told my mum I would be a recruiter. Now, that's a bit crazy. And I think, that sparks an interest in people, because most people want to be a doctor or, an airline pilot or a fireman or a nurse or whatever, the standard sort of jobs that kids know of whereas I wanted to be a recruiter, which is a bit crazy. So moving on, I had someone the other day, for example, who her parents asked her to throw out some fabrics. They had a fabric company, and the offcuts, she was 8 years old. And she thought, well, instead of throwing them out, why don't I sell them? So she started selling the offcuts. So this is the stuff I've sort of suggested to her. Put something in there that's going to grab attention. So I knew when I was this age that I was really resourceful. These are the reasons why. And then you can go into a little bit more about, who you are. What I'll do is, after this session, I can share, I did a webinar a while ago. So if you like, I can share the link for that. It's recorded, and it will give people a really good, much more than I can give tonight, but a really good overview on how you write a really good about section. And there's a worksheet that goes with that. So I'll send that through. I can give you that link, and you can maybe send it out to the attendees. So this is a really long-winded answer to your question, but so LinkedIn should be something that differentiates you, something that brands you, and you can then use LinkedIn as well through the interaction you have with people. That's the really powerful part of LinkedIn. The other thing to be aware of is there are keyword searches going on. So, in the bulk of your resume, when you come to the jobs, it's important to put keywords in there so that when someone's searching you, you're going to pop up in their searches aligned with those keywords. For example, in Snowflake, I'm always searching for cloud. I'm searching for data analytics, database, those sorts of things. So you can get your tech words in there, but don't put it necessarily in that first section. The first section is your opportunity to create a bit of character and stand out, so that you're not the same as all the other data analytics people. And in the resume, similar thing, more succinct. So the opening section should be fairly short. When I send you the link for the LinkedIn webinar, there's also within that, there's a resume template. So what I suggest is sticking as much as possible to achievements in your resume, as opposed to a lot of people think that they've got to get everything into a resume, and they've got to say everything they've ever done, and you just can't do that. So the resume, to me, is a sales document. It needs to have enough information that's going to grab someone's attention, and it's got to create talking points. So and I don't know how many people on this call have been in sales. I know, Ella, you're in sales, and so if you were going to a customer, you don't send them a document stuffed full of information first. You go and you give them something that's going to grab their attention. You go and talk to them. You understand what it is they're looking for, and then you give them a presentation. So that's my take on LinkedIn and resumes. And there's a whole lot more in terms of, how you approach looking for a job on LinkedIn as well. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really helpful, because a lot of people, when they think about LinkedIn, that's just another method of presenting myself apart from my CV. And so the mistake is thinking that is my CV. I don't need to worry about the CV or the cover letter, whatever that may be anymore, because LinkedIn is there and that's the new tool. So that's a mistake I see a lot of people make. I think what's really important to understand is, I was going to ask you, what's your recommendation for job seekers these days? Because it's been a constantly changing climate with COVID and lockdown and things like that. And I think, does it seem like the power is actually in the candidate's hands, seeing as, stuff like working from home, remote work, flexible work is so demanded from everybody? How does that feel like for employers, and what about job seekers? How is it different?
I don't know that it's necessarily really different. It is different in the sense that we have a different focus on work, and I think I'm seeing a lot of businesses have embraced it. A lot of people who couldn't cope with not seeing their staff every day and not micromanaging and doing all of that have had to get over it. And that, yes, in terms of the I don't know if I'd call it the power being in the candidate's hands, but it is a candidate's market at the moment, is what I would describe as a candidate's market. So, but that does not mean go out there and start being super demanding, because it's a two-way street. And, people still want to hire people who are going to fit their culture, share their values, all of those things. And part of that's always going to be, hard work, commitment, loyalty, focus, all of those things. So to start sort of, well, I'm not going to work for you unless I can work from home 5 days a week, probably not the best move, I would say. In terms of, opportunity, I think there's a real opportunity for candidates to get in front of people in terms of getting Zoom calls and that sort of thing happening through networking online, whereas in the past everyone was busy running around and you couldn't sort of access people as easily. So I think you can really, it's a candidate's opportunity to access decision makers and people in businesses more easily, because they're there and they're not so tied up. Yeah. So I mean, look, my recommendation to anyone is always just back to the branding thing I said, and you mentioned cover letters, and people are really lazy these days. I remember we had to do a cover letter and a resume, and you'd read it and it'd have to be perfect, and then it would be delivered, you'd send it out in an envelope, and God forbid if you had a spelling error. And now we've got spell check, and you get these resumes that turn up and they're full of errors. So number one, be the person who doesn't have errors in their application. Take the time to actually write a cover letter, because a lot of people don't. Now, I have philosophies on, never apply for a job is my philosophy if you can help it. So you've got to try and get in front of people, but sometimes you just can't. And sometimes it's the cover letter that breaks the ice and does something different, because if most people aren't doing it. Again, it's your opportunity to do something different. Another really cool idea you can use is you can include a video. So you might just send a letter, but you might have a link to, here's a video that I made for you. And it's just a quick introduction on yourself. Nobody else is going to do that. Very, very rarely you're going to get someone doing that. So, you know, choosing to do that and differentiate yourself, again, it's going to get you in front of them without you actually being in front of them. So yeah, my tip would be, you know, and cover letters should have a bit of an energy to them rather than a, thank you so much for reading my application. And that's another one of the things that I sort of coach people through, because I just think it's the only way to get cut through. So yeah, so that would be a couple of quick tips on that. But I you know, I think make the effort and stand out, probably the two things that I think are really important, and just don't assume it's not important.
I still remember seeing, you know, a couple of my friends back in the day, they would copy and paste their CV and changing just the company name in that cover letter. And that was definitely not great. But, you know, speaking of building that connection, and I think for a lot of candidates now in this sort of climate, and it's been really trending to really look for good culture. Like what they're looking for is, I really want to be in a place where they value me. And it's a lot of me, but again, you mentioned it's a two-way street. But what does good culture mean for you? And, you know, what does that look like in a company? I think it's really important for people to understand that. So what do you?
Well, firstly, let me just say that culture is a big part of how you connect with companies and how you connect with people and how you get in the door, and things you should put in your cover letter. And so you've got to know what your values are, and then you need to find cultures that fit your values. But honestly, and someone else said this to me today, it's normally the manager who sets the culture in a team. So you can come and ask me, what's the culture like at HPE, or what's the culture like at Snowflake? I'm going to say at Snowflake, they're pretty good at hiring people who are a culture fit. Therefore, the leaders are mostly, you know, set this great culture. The leaders you can have a great culture with great values and a terrible leader, and people come and work for cultures, but they leave leaders. So it's, you know, that's really important. So if you're out there in the marketplace and you're asking other people, what's the culture like? It's not necessarily going to be the same for you as it is for others, because you may resonate with particular values and styles of operating and that kind of thing, whereas someone else might not. So, you know, and the other thing is, someone could be in Amazon and they might find that they love it because they've got a really, really great leader who sets a fantastic culture and lives the Amazon values amazingly. And then you might find that you've got another team where it's not so great. So, you know, to me, culture is about behaviors and communication styles and that sort of thing. And you can only really work that out yourself through conversations with the leaders and the people in that. So my 2 cents worth on that is, never assume that because someone says it's a great culture, it's a great culture, and never assume that when someone says it's a bad culture or it's not great, that it is. So always make your own choices and do your own sort of due diligence on that stuff. But yeah, I mean, a great culture is to me, and again, like I say, it's different to everyone, is a place where people are, you know, treated with respect. Everybody is treating one another with respect. Everybody is focused on mission, and, you know, what are we here to achieve? And, you know, everybody's enjoying working together to achieve that mission.
I think the other thing that people sort of, one of the mistakes is, especially young people, is that they think great culture is having beers on taps and then catering every Friday. And I hear that a lot, but frankly, it's not. It's definitely not what you should be looking for as the only factor to working at a company.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's really good that you've shone the light in the, you know, around culture. But I think the other thing that people really lack is that, you know, the ability to present themselves and their skills through storytelling is the other thing as well, especially during interviews. Like, how do you really show yourself who you are and tell your story when you really want to get personal, you really want to connect with these leaders and say, I'm the right fit? How do you tell that story?
I always think of 3 different answers I could give you on these things, but so let me put it this way. So you're interviewing for a role. Put yourself in the shoes of the interviewer and think about how that conversation is going to go. So the conversation could be that they're asking you questions and you're answering their questions. And you're answering their questions, and often you get people who sit there and go, oh, hold on, let me think about, what's your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And people go, good question. You know they're going to ask you those questions. So for God's sake, prepare. And when you're preparing, prepare examples in story format. So, you can talk about the first question someone's often going to ask you is, tell me about yourself, or tell me about your career. So you have 2 to 5 minutes at the beginning of the conversation to really get that across. And this is your opportunity to stand out. It's like that about section in the LinkedIn profile. This is your opportunity to hit, you can hit multiple touch points in that one story. So firstly, you don't want to be completely open and just, when I was young, my dog died and I, none of that. So you've got to format it, but then you've got to rehearse it. So the format should be, start from the beginning. How did you get into what you do now? What made you realize what you were good at? What were the highlights for you? What have been the highlights for you throughout? So you're on a journey. So you think of it as a timeline, and then you think of the highlights, and you think of those highlights as relevant points that will get across that you're going to be a fit for their culture and their team. But most people are looking for similar things. They're looking for drive, they're looking for loyalty, they're looking for, they're looking for people who, it depends. But if you're going to be, for example, in an administrative role, you want to get in that, what I worked out was I absolutely love the operational side of things. I really enjoy putting together documentation. So, my next step took me here. So you just put a little bit of personality into a little bit of reasoning, and why have I made the choices I've made, and then and your highlights will come out. And the second thing is, when you're preparing your examples, so you should always have what I call a library of stories, but your library is your library of examples. So you're most often going to be asked, give us an example of a time when you were, you were in a really difficult situation with a customer and you had to solve it. So again, a great way to do that is, you can call it a story, but I don't know if you've heard of the STAR methodology. So situation, task, action, result. Another thing, actually, I've got a really good document on this. I can send you that as well. So it basically, you put together your examples using that. And if you go to an interview with Amazon, for example, they're specifically looking for that. They're looking for people who are presenting their responses in STAR format. And that really becomes a story. So each little example you give can be a micro story. We'll call it a micro story. That's a cool way of describing it. And, so I think just thinking about making it a more interesting conversation than just sitting there and scratching your head and answering and repeating the same sort of examples. So preparation is absolutely key to that.
Did you have any stories where your client has had a really tough one? The employer's had a really tough time finding the right candidate. Is there any advice you would give those sort of employers? They can't really find the right fit. They're struggling. What are some of the advices you would give the other side, the employer side?
Okay, good question. Firstly, to really fundamentally look at what the really important things you're looking for are. So when I take a brief from anyone, we're looking for what are the values, what are the behaviors, what are the must-haves, what are the nice-to-haves, and also how are we going to sell this to this person? It's absolutely critical in this as well. So again, it's two-way street. So, you open up the scope of the sort of person you're going to hire, because for too long in this industry, and in the tech industry, and in my career, have I seen people want to put, just find ticks in boxes. And, the most successful teams are super diverse. And that's where the innovation comes from. So for me, it's actually about educating the leaders to think more broadly in terms of what it is they're trying to achieve, and look at how then they're going to, you know, do the right thing and position it with the right person. I've seen people be super successful who haven't ticked a lot of boxes, but bring a whole lot of different traits that are really, really valuable. So that would probably be my big piece of advice, is just, you know, open your mind up to something different, but you need to know what's absolutely critical and what would be nice to have.
I'm going to try and pivot towards the audience now, because I can see quite a number of questions that have gone through. So it'd be really interesting to see your take on some of these questions for tonight. I've got the first question from Pat. How can you guarantee the prospective employer will read the cover letter? If they have 100 plus applications, will they be read?
If I was a fly on the wall, I'd tell you, but I have a tip for you for that. So for me, and you know, this is a technique I've even used myself, is firstly try and think about who might be the hiring manager on the role. So rather than just sending in a cover letter saying, dear HR, thank you for blah blah blah, you need to do something different, because yeah, if you do that, unlikely they're going to read it, Pat. It's, you know, they're getting a lot of applications. However, if you were to write a cover letter that was a bit quirky and a bit different and had a bit of energy to it and a bit of character, and even could have a little video clip in it, and you were to send that to the potential hiring manager's inbox in LinkedIn, then you're going to get a lot more attention. So rather than just sending in an application, send it to that person directly. Now, they're probably going to pass it on, but there's a good chance they're going to look at it first. And if it comes from a different angle, you know, especially if you are in sales or in customer facing sort of environment, they're going to think that's pretty proactive and pretty clever. So, you know, again, you should be showing your skills through the way you approach your application as well. So my advice is get it in their inbox and make it a bit different and quirky. You know, give it something that's just going to grab attention at the beginning.
Yeah, thank you for that. Next question is from Tao. Tao, do you want to ask your question? I'll throw it to you.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Ella. So I was actually just curious in terms of, like, you know, you mentioned that it's right now a candidate's market. What is your projection of when that's going to subside or lessen?
Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, honestly, I've been in recruitment a very, very long time, and the different twists and turns I've seen and the different, you know, elements of the market. People ask me every year at Christmas, you know, is this a bad time to look? It depends on the year. It just really varies. And for me, you can always, if nobody else is looking, so everyone goes away at Christmas and thinks, nah, don't need to look at jobs, there's nothing there, then you're the one that's going to stand out because you're the one who's there. And, you know, I know for sure that, for example, Snowflake, our next 2 quarters are huge for recruitment. So I have been told no holidays over Christmas or leading up to, because that's going to be a boom time for us. So never underestimate the market and what it can, you know, what it's like for you. But I think it's got to be the right time in your career to make the change. Don't judge it on what the market is like for you, you know, in terms of jobs right now.
Right now, you know, there's a lot of roles out there, and they're saying that it's because we can't get talent from international. So therefore, a lot of the talent we have to try and find locally. So then, you know, with the whole remote working and the ability to be flexible around where you work and how you work, like, it doesn't seem to match up, because if you can work anywhere, then why can't you not hire, you know, international?
Yeah. So I think it's a bit of a mix, honestly, and I think it depends on who you talk to. You know, there are a lot of companies who are saying that they don't mind people working from anywhere, but they're actually lying. They don't really follow through with it. So it's not real. You know, there's a lot of companies who are saying we can't get people from overseas, but when they can, they don't. So, you know, yeah, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. And like I say, recruiting market is really fickle and it just changes all the time. But, you know, same as anything, if it's there, embrace it.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Tao, for the question. I think, Jeff, you've got a question as well. Did you want to come off mute and ask your question as well?
Okay, so I've actually forgotten what my first question was, but I'm just going to go on whatever's in my head. So I've heard that the recruitment process is fundamentally broken, because only 2% of people really love their jobs. What are your views on that? Because I mean, it seems to me like there is this dance that people play in this recruitment process that makes people end up in jobs that they may not necessarily love or like. And on the other hand, it seems to not sort of get the result that the employers are looking for either. Do you have a insight into why this is the case, that this industry is sort of functioning the way it is? And certainly I feel like, certain people aren't recognized for what they bring to the table as well, because of probably prejudices and biases of the employer as well. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but if you were to have a magic wand to fix this industry, what would you do?
Okay, so you're talking about, and I just want to clarify the question. So you're talking about the recruitment process being broken and people are being hired into the wrong jobs. Is that what you're saying?
Well, basically one's a result of the other, right? So because of the dance that they do, because of this process that you go through, you get people who interview well versus people who can do the job. And there are studies to say that interview is one of the worst predicators of job performance as well. So how, from your point of view, you've been in this industry 20 years, do you have a view to that particular point of view?
Yeah.
And if you had a magic wand, how would you fix it?
I would reprogram all of the leaders' brains if I had a magic wand. That's a pretty big ask, right? So it's not going to happen.
They pay your bills. How's that
not going to happen? You reprogram their minds to think differently and behave differently. But and look, it comes back to this whole culture and values conversation again. Reality is there's certain behaviors, there's certain cultures, there's certain values that we need to look for, and strengths, and playing to people's strengths. So I don't think there's ever going to be, there's no magic wand in terms of really knowing, this person is perfect for this role. But I do think if we embrace diversity and we embrace, what you said about prejudice, I see where you're coming from, and there is a lot of that. I think, so I can only go on the experiences I've had, and I have worked with organizations. I've worked with, I'm not going to say organizations, leaders. So I was saying leaders set their own culture, and leaders have their own prejudices and their own ideas and their own perspectives. Some people, I was having conversations with someone the other day who said to me, "Oh, interesting, I wouldn't have looked at that because that person's had a gap. They've had like 3 years out having a baby, whatever." And and they actually acknowledged their own prejudice and said, I wouldn't have spotted something there. So I think it's awareness. It's that's where I talk about reprogramming people's brains. We can reprogram the way we think about it and the way we look at it, but you've got to take away a lot of it's a hard thing to do. It's like changing habits. It takes many years. So I don't know if I've got an answer for you, Jeff, in terms of how you can fix it in one easy step, but I do think I'm seeing more and more leaders coming through who are more open to options. One massive one that's coming through now is ageism. Like that's a huge issue, and and there's a lot of young people on this call, and I think the younger people are guilty of ageism, but also a lot of the older people are guilty of ageism, strangely. So it's truly being able to differentiate and hire for the real skills, the ability, values. And when I talk about values, I don't mean fluffy values. I mean true values that make people do what they do, and connect them to something. So yeah, I think reprogramming their brains, but there's a lot of leaders who can't be reprogrammed. So we're just going to wait until they move on. Wait until they move out of the industry. But and a lot of companies are running programs now that enable to remove bias and that sort of thing. I have to say, I'm just going to give a big shout out to Snowflake. I have not, everybody I've been talking to, I've been there for 3 weeks, and there's no bias. It really just doesn't seem to be a problem. And if you look across the business, they're just hiring all sorts of people, and it's fantastic. And if you look at companies who do that well, innovation is rife. Like innovation is is happening, and performance is really great, and they don't spend so much money on recruitment and and turning over staff. So that's another big plus. But yeah, so I don't know if I've got the magic wand answer, but yeah.
Just, I guess, topic around the culture. I guess from a candidate's perspective, sometimes people get feedback of, they're not the right culture fit, which I think is quite subjective. What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously, there's obviously an underlying pin, or, there's something unspoken, but, I think that's an easy way out, to give to candidates sometimes when, they don't get constructive feedback back.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And, it's a bit of a cop-out often. And, so the thing is, sometimes, I have to say, sometimes as in my recruitment career, it's been gut feel for me. And I've just known that it's not the right fit for the team. And, whether you describe that as culture fit or not, it is a cop-out. I think also, though, you've got to recognize that a lot of companies have got a lot of candidates coming through, and they need to differentiate and discern somehow. So that's always going to be an issue when there's high volumes of applicants. And I don't know what the answer is. I think, in my opinion, this is where you've got to differentiate yourself in the whole process, and you've got to sort of stand out, and you've got to be yourself, because my opinion is, if you're being yourself, you'll be attracted to the people who you should be attracted to, and they will be attracted to you. So it's about having the confidence to really, truly, come with those examples, those stories that are really real for you. And that comes across as authentic. It comes across with a degree of vulnerability, and potentially, you're going to find your right home. If you're there's a lot of everyone's trying really hard, because that's what you do when you're trying to get a job. And I know how challenging that is. But sometimes if you can sort of step into that, and take ownership of that process, and really, work on how you can be you, and how you can, create a connection with a culture that is a fit for you. So, yeah, but I do think that companies use it as it's kind of a bullshit line sometimes, and just a bit of a cop out.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And then, sorry, last thing, you were saying, obviously you need to differentiate, from yourself and stand out. So one of the things you suggested was reaching out to people on LinkedIn. I guess, how would you reach, because, hypothetically, if, 10 people then reached out to the person, then it's just moving the, Seek application over to the LinkedIn application. And if the line manager's smashed and really busy, then it's going to get to the point where it's going to be like spam as well. What's another suggestion, or any other thoughts around how to differentiate?
Look, I have a whole coaching, module on this, where I talk to people about, differentiating themselves through how they get to the people in the businesses. I also think, I don't know if I should say this in a big forum, but there are ways you can try and get to a hiring manager without actually acknowledging you've seen a job. So, it's just a trick I teach people, that, you can approach a business, you can tell, you're often going to be able to guess roughly who's going to be the hiring manager. You might approach them and say, look, I've got the opportunity, I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to be able to consider, my next career move, and make sure I make some good choices. And, it's really important to me that I find a company that's a values fit. I've done a bit of research, love the look of your organisation, would love to just catch up with you and get an understanding of what it is that is, really successful in your team. Like, what do you look for in your team, and how might we be able to do something sometime in the future? And they're thinking, oh, it's interesting, we've got this job, it could be an interesting fit for this job, potentially they're thinking that, so your job is to get in front of them in some way. And that can be challenging, and it takes a bit of guts sometimes, but it's a good way of standing out from the crowd. So, and you can do that even when there isn't a job. So you can be proactive with organizations and leaders from that perspective as well. And the other option is obviously to find someone in the business who can introduce you. That's another one. So, I think 70% of Snowflake's jobs are filled with referrals at the moment. So, that gives you an indication of how powerful that can be. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Rebecca, for the response. Thank you, Pat, for the question. I noticed that there are a lot of questions coming through, so I'm just filtering through which ones that have been answered. I think there's one that's quite interesting from Kashmira. How do you craft a resume and cover letter if you have had a career break? I think you've sort of touched on it, but what's your main advice for that one?
I personally think it's becoming more normalized and more acceptable to people that you've had a career break. So, I think, again, you've got to step into this stuff with confidence and you've got to be yourself. So, the whole concept of trying to sort of hide it, cover it up, I don't think it's the best way to go. I think the best way to go is just to be, be proud of the career break that you've had. You've done that for a reason, whatever that reason is. Be proud of it. And, great companies with great cultures are actually fine with career breaks. This is where the bias and things are starting to be removed. So some of the better companies, and they're the places you want to work, right? If you can, is work for the places that embrace it, don't reject it. And sometimes it takes a bit longer to find them, but my personal opinion is love what you do, live a life you love. You've got to, if you want to be working for a company, you work a lot of your time. So, try and work somewhere where it does actually resonate with you. So don't be scared to be yourself and just be real.
Rebecca, just on that note, I just wanted to ask you, so I have a marketing background. I've taken a bit of a break. Now in that break, I've upskilled myself because to overcompensate for the experience that I've not had in those last 4 years. And I know that marketing it keeps evolving constantly. But now when they need experience in certain things, I have the skills, but I don't have demonstrated skills. You know what I mean? So how does one pitch yourself then?
Sometimes it's a question of having to take a sideways step or a step back to take a step forward. So sometimes, if you haven't got the demonstrated skills, and if you've got 10 people applying and 8 people have the demonstrated skills, then you can't really overcome that. Like, that just is what it is, right? And so you need to go into a role where they're not looking for that. So to what Jeffrey said earlier and asked me about, how would you change? It is about for leaders going, well, is it really necessary for them to have those specific experience with those skills, or is it a whole lot of attitudes and behaviors and things like that we're looking for someone to bring, and with the capability to do that? So, again, it's finding the companies that see it that way, or it's taking a step into something that's a little easier, where you can, in a business that you can see you might be able to move your career internally in that business.
Awesome. Thank you, Kashmira. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to go to Tanya. You've got a really good question. Do you want to take that yourself and ask Rebecca?
Yeah, I would love to. So Rebecca, when changing industry to really pursue my passion and, to do something I'm really loving, how can I stand out without 3+ years of experience? Because this is the issue I am having here in Australia.
Okay. Can you give me a bit more context?
For example, I'm sending out my resumes to so many companies. I have experience in sales, and now I'd like to go to marketing, and I'm not even getting the chance for an interview. And fun fact is, all my jobs I've got here, I got in meeting people, and I met people, and they were directly, oh, we want you, we get you, we want you on board.
Yeah.
But sending out my resume, there's nothing coming back.
Yeah. So like I said before, your job is to get in front of them. So, see it as, don't apply for a job is one of the things I tell people all the time. So when they come to me for career transition coaching and I say, don't apply for jobs, they go, but your job is to do something different to grab their attention, and you want to go into marketing, so market to them. So I would be doing something a little bit different. I would be sending them, the old school stuff, send them something in the mail on polka dot paper, or I don't know, come up with something that shows them that you have the ability to do the marketing. So give them something a bit unique and different. You could even do the video thing. So you can actually, on LinkedIn, you can record, as long as you can get connected to someone, you can actually record a voice message and send it to them. I think there might be video on there now as well. So, but you have to be connected to them. So again, that's another way of grabbing their attention. There's very few people who would get a voice message in their inbox, and they'll listen to it. And if you're good enough at, you don't get a very long period of time, but you can think of something that will stand out and hopefully get you in front of them. So your job is to get in front of them. Use whatever you need to do to get in front of them. Don't make it the same as everybody else. And so that's probably the biggest tip I can give you. So it's being brave and putting yourself out there. And if you really want to make that transition, then go for it. You've got nothing to lose.
So you're kind of saying, oh, okay, knocking on doors directly in person. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah. Your experience is in sales. Use your sales skills and show them your marketing skills.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Tanya. I know we've got 6 minutes left and a couple of questions, so I'm just going to handpick a few. Frankie's got a question. What is your suggestion so that we can be ourselves in the interview? And sometimes we get really nervous. What's your tip to get around that?
Preparation. That's it. And so look, most people feel really uncomfortable talking to camera, but if you prepare your little stories and you do them along the lines that I'm talking about, so STAR methodology, which I'll send through a document on, and you prepare those and you rehearse them, so it just becomes a lot more comfortable for you because they're already there. And the other thing, how they say when you're doing a presentation, just to picture them naked. You could try that. I know interviews are really nerve-wracking. And so I think, look, being honest, the other part of it is mindset. It's actually working on your mindset. And, I don't know if you've ever heard of the power pose, but, spending a bit of time in a power pose before you go to the interview, listening to your favorite tunes and having literally dancing around like a crazy person, whatever it is that makes you happy, something that makes you feel light and makes you feel yourself. And I often think of the person that I'm talking to as if they're a friend. So I just pretend that they're a friend, and I'll have a conversation just to try and make myself relax into being me. So there's different things you can do around mindset as well, but preparation and doing the work to get yourself in the right frame of mind.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I've got a question from Tarinda as well. Why is it easier to get ahead in a career by changing roles? I mean, do you think so as well?
I don't understand the question. So why is it, can you ask me with more context?
Let me provide a bit more context. I think most of the time when we're looking at senior roles, what I have noticed are people that hired externally as opposed to internal candidates is that because they have certain skills and they would develop that over a short period of time and then move on to another role.
That's a really interesting question and take on it, because I think it varies. Like some companies want to hire internally into more senior roles, and I tell people sometimes you've got to go in, you got to take a sideways step to take an upward step, because sometimes you've got to really learn the business and understand and earn your stripes, and then you'll be able to get promoted. And other times I think it's just, honestly, I think it's leaders being weak. It's an unfair thing to say, but leaders who don't want to take any risks want the proven and tried and tested people, which I don't necessarily agree with. So, an interesting question. I think
almost basically saying you prefer hiring external, like they rather promote from outside than within. I mean, I see that at a lot of large organizations, right? And so what you get is this idea that for you to move ahead, you need to go outside and then to come back. But doesn't that just say something that is fundamentally wrong with the culture of
absolutely
both organizations?
Like I said, weak leadership. It's a cop-out again. But I think when they hire externally, often they're hiring someone who's already been proven in that job. So it's lack of taking risk. It's not necessarily hiring someone from another organization who's stepping up into that role. They very rarely will do that. So normally it will be, we need someone in a leadership role. We need someone who's already been in a leadership role. We're not going to take a risk and put you into a leadership role. But yeah, I'm not suggesting it's right. It's kind of ridiculous. But my personal opinion is if you want to move into a leadership role, often it's easier to do it. It is if you're going to want to go into a leadership role, make sure that you are socializing that within your business. Make sure that you start behaving as if you're a leader without necessarily being a leader. A really, really good book that you can look at is Keith Farrar, I think it is. I think it's Keith Farrar's.
This is Never Lunch Alone you're talking about?
Yeah, he does lunch and but he also does Leading Without Authority. Really good book. So, it gives you some really great tactics and techniques. And he talks about, how you become a leader and you start behaving like a leader and you start taking on leadership responsibility without having the title and the pay to go with it. It just is a natural state that you become. And that's where you'll be identified. People will see that you're stepping into those leadership shoes, and then you're more likely to get the opportunity to start taking that step forward. But it's also socializing it, making it really clear, from an early stage. Find someone in your organization and approach them and ask them to mentor you into leadership, because then they will love the fact that they have helped you achieve that. So yeah, that's probably my tip there. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks. Just one last question to follow on. Do you think there's an ideal time that someone should stay in a role before they move to a different role?
No, I mean, not personally, but I know a lot of companies say you have to be there a year or 2 years before you can move roles, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But I think you can. It's about capability and potential, and how you are being at that time. I that's my opinion though, and does not necessarily shared by everybody.
Thank you.
Awesome. I think we are just 1 minute over 8 now, but I think the discussion has been really awesome. So thank you, Rebecca, for taking all of those questions, and thank you to our audience as well. I mean, the time that you guys are, taking the time to spend with us 7 to 8 on a night like this has been really good. So, thank you for your insight, Rebecca, and thank you everyone for staying on. I know that you had a little bit of a special gift for everybody who stayed on for today.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all for being so open and being, looking for advice, because I think that's a really big thing in itself, is some people just don't have the awareness to step out of their comfort zone and actually go seeking growth. And so what I wanted to do was just offer, for anyone who's been on this call and they would like it, I'm more than happy to spend 20 minutes with you one-on-one and just cover your own personal situation if it's something you want to talk about. So Ella will share my email address, and so all you need to do is just let me know you are here and that you would like to do that, and we can set up a 20-minute call at a time that suits us both.
Yeah, awesome. I will also grab some links and documents off you, because you mentioned a few links and spreadsheets, so I'll share that with all the attendees tonight. Thank you so much, guys. If you want to join us in our next one is in the next fortnight on the 19th with Pat Devlin, The Art of an Imperfect Leader. So that is coming up in the next webinar. So hopefully to see you guys there. It's my boss, so that's going to be really exciting to have him on.
Yeah, I know Pat really well. He rocks. Yeah, and I loved the story he told when I had him on my show as well. So yeah, he's really cool. Definitely tune in, guys. Worth it.
For sure. Alrighty, thank you guys. Have a really good evening. But yeah, for those who want to stick around and have a chat, I'm happy to host you guys. But thank you, Rebecca, once again.
No worries.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Wang, the founder of the Professional Development Forum.
PDF was established to help young diverse professionals find fulfillment in the modern Australian workplace.
By asking questions to the most successful, influential and inspirational people we knew.
We were inspired by their stories of tenacity and passion.
We learned about the creative approaches to overcome challenges.
We believe that everyone, not just the elite few, should have access to the knowledge, mindset and network to develop themselves.
By becoming the best version of ourselves, we lead a happier, more fulfilling life and inspire those around us to do the same.
Moving our events online has made us more accessible than ever. We share what we learned on our website, YouTube channel and podcast. So please share this video, subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. We look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event.